Thank you, Enrique. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the spring semester, and a special welcome to our colleagues at UW-Washington County and UW-Waukesha, who will be like the rest of the UWM community. So last fall, I talked about UWM's impact and the framework for key strategic actions that underlie that impact. Today, I'd like to talk about our progress and ultimately, given that framework, the progress that we've made. We live in a dynamic environment, so I'm also going to mention our changing context, talk about what's ahead, and throughout this, I'll talk about our guiding values. I'll begin with highlights, updates, and samples of the positive developments that have occurred since last fall. That's not a typo at the top. That is, in fact, something that's virtually unprecedented for us to have such positive news. I think we have turned a corner, and we're currently implementing one of the more encouraging state budgets that we've had in a long time, especially with respect to compensation and the capital budget. I'll talk a little bit about each of those. On the compensation, I don't think it's a surprise given the communication that's occurred that we'll have 4.04% exercise during the next biennial budget. We have 2% that will be administered in the July timeframe, and then 2% in January of 19. So that's subject to the legislature's Joint Committee, and Employment Relations approval. So there is a caveat that's there. UWM, you may not know, is required to fund 30% of that, and that 30% represents over $3 million for us in terms of our portion of that. So that's important to recognize. The rest of the state plan covers the remainder. There's also a separate component that's $1.5 million that I've allocated to faculty retention and faculty compression. I'd like to talk a little bit about why that's so important. This will occur in the latter part of the next fiscal year. Those funds come from one-time allocation of the restoration from UW system to the lapse that occurred. In fact, that's what's funding. There's $5 million is the UWM portion. $3 million of that will go to our overall salaries, 1.5 specifically to the faculty salaries, and then much of the rest of that will go to graduate student stipends, which I'll talk about later in this presentation. And of course, there's a strategic investment that is required here, and this is something that, as I think about what has happened in terms of the compression issues, in particular with regard to the national and international market for our faculty, why that's so important for us to keep the robust, talented faculty, in particular for us to preserve the R1 status and to continue to build on that. We know more is needed with respect to compensation for our future faculty and staff increases, and as we have more funds, then those will be distributed as well. So on the capital budget side, we have almost $86 million that will be allocated to UWM, about $33 million for the renovations in Sandberg Hall, and a little over $52 million for the work that is going to be undertaken in the Northwest Quad. So for us to achieve that level of support, it's remarkable in the recent historic context, and we hope and look forward to continued investments as we go forward. As we go forward, we're working right now on the state budget process for 1921. And there's a lot of steps in this, but I want you to know what the priorities are. On the academic side, clearly the top priorities are chemistry building. The second priority is our student union building. Third would be the Kalachi Annex. And fourth is submission request for what we call all state, all agency funds to work on a lot of the different projects that need to be addressed. They're smaller, they're not in the tens of millions of dollars, but there's an awful lot of projects, $1, $3, $5 million that are necessary. So those are some things that are very, very positive directionally. And you know, I was having a conversation the other day with some folks who'd been here, and I found that I was the senior one, and none of us could remember when we'd had a compensation exercise this large. And so I asked somebody yesterday who's been here 40 years plus, and I won't say who that is, but they said they couldn't remember a 2-2 in their time here, and you may recall that, but this is just how positive that is for us not to be able to remember us having that type of exercise. So we're very fortunate, again, subject to the Joint Committee to do this. On the continuation of on positive financial news, our campaign has really done remarkably well. This is Made in Milwaukee, Shaping the World, and that's something that I can't tell you how proud I am of all the efforts that you've enabled us to achieve through this, but you can see the big picture type of perspective on the slide itself. We're almost $185 million into our $200 million campaign, which puts us over 92%. The majority of those funds at this point, over $110 million, go into student scholarships and other types of student support. And the second largest category is aimed at research, and the third largest is aimed at our community engagement and talent pipeline areas. I want to thank Vice Chancellor Patricia Borger and her team, but also all of you for the great efforts that it takes to have this type of campaign. It's double, essentially, what our last working goal of our last campaign was. So it's great to have achieved. We anticipate this calendar year closing this out at $200 million and having a great celebration in early 19. And that's something very positive to look forward to. So this next slide actually shows a lot of different highlights, and I'm going to just share a quick slide on each one. These are some of the positive things that I'd like to share with you since our last plenary, and each one of them represents a thing that illustrates our impact and shows how we continue to make such an important difference. I think that there's risk in showing any half dozen items or talking about any particular areas because you're saying, what about my program or my area, or what about me? So I'm apologizing in advance, but really want to share what I consider to be some very positive things. One of these is, and this picture is the cover of a UWM report. Our Vice Chancellor, Tom Lujak, and his team have put together a whole new approach to how we engage the media. And this has resulted in the last 3 quarters of 2017 alone in 10,000 different media placements in the state of Wisconsin. This is a report that goes dedicated to 200 different journalists in the state. We've had 15 million social media impact points because of this. So this is pretty phenomenal, and it really addresses how we want to get the word out, how we can do such great things, but if we don't get the word out, if we don't convey the importance and the impact, then it's one of those things that just goes by the wayside. And this really shows how we punch above our weight. The second area is something that you've probably seen some of the media coverage about. It's a great story how Oprah Winfrey joined us for the December commencement, the graduation of her half-sister, Pat, or Patricia Lee. And Patricia graduated with an undergraduate degree in sociology, and I have to tell you how fun it was to spend some time with Oprah and her sister Pat. After graduation, we had a lunch meeting, and Oprah, told me she's been at 10 graduations in the last year because of her girls program that she has. And she named the universities, some of the most prestigious in the country and world, and she said ours was the best. And she talked about how smooth it went. She talked about the impact of the message and the diversity of the audience and just what she thought about UWM. And I was just so proud, and it's just a very positive type of experience. We'll continue to be in touch and see what kind of follow-up, so stay tuned for possibly more on that front. On something that I talked about in my Thanksgiving message to the campus, I want to just share with you that we are continuing both with the food pantry, which actually goes into regular hours. They've started regular hours last week, and then the mobile food market, which has made 3 appearances, and that will now become something that has at least monthly appearances, and there's a bonus meeting next week. And these address serious issues of food insecurity, but they're open not just to students, but to all members. And for example, the mobile food market has a variety of different products that are 25% off, things that you would find in your grocery store that are available for a lot of individuals who don't have the money to buy the healthy, fresh food and have the access that they otherwise would have. So that's a really neat thing. And the Student Association is the leader of this, and they have on their website the specific schedule and much more details. We had the first trip to Puerto Rico our Office of Undergraduates Admissions led with Alberto Maldonado leading the way and several from our team. They attended an event called App Strong Puerto Rico, just 8 weeks after Hurricane Maria. In addition to bringing a lot of supplies and a lot of things that individuals needed, they had a lot of visits with students and prospective students and family members that resulted in 29 admissions, 43 applications, and 98 contact cards for students who will be submitting their materials later. Today we have a virtual tour of UWM in Spanish available for those and other students, and we also will be having on Saturday Casa Abierta, which is the bilingual open house, and I encourage you to drop by on Saturday morning from 9 to noon in the Student Union. We always have this in the ballroom for that, and it's a really great opportunity where students come in from all across the state and northern Illinois, and sometimes from other states as well. And this is consistent with our Hispanic Serving Institute initiative. A neat celebration occurring this year will be the 15th anniversary of our LGBT+ Resource Center. This center is one of the main reasons and very important for helping establish on our campus a climate of support and reinforcement for incredible diversity. It has enabled us to achieve top 25 LGBT status in the country. This isn't the top 25%. This is out of all the thousands of universities in the country. We're in the top 25. If you look at the other campuses that are in there, we're in incredibly good company. I couldn't be more proud of this. It's epitomizing diversity as one of our guiding values. On the recent breaking news, you'll notice that today the fences are up on the corner of Kenwood and Maryland for the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center. We had a ground staking event in the summer where we had the regents, and that's what this picture is from. But we will be having the formal groundbreaking, the shovel in, if not later this week, next week. But we're putting the fences up, so construction will begin on the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center. 2 quick points on this. One is the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center cuts across every school and college. There's opportunities and engagement for all our students. It can give a lot of examples of that, of how we're picking up through fresh ideas, a lot of great things where a lot of our students that hadn't otherwise been involved can today. And the way this is built is a really important distinction from some of our past major projects. We received $10 million for the building from the state, and we have now surpassed $15 million for the endowment. So the private fundraising side, that's part of that larger campaign. And with having achieved $15 million as an endowment, it generates the $600,000, and that was my minimal goal. I'd like us to achieve ultimately $25 million to generate $1 million in operating funds, but we have exceeded when we expected to raise that money, and we're going to keep the pedal down and continue to pursue that. It's a great model. So this slide is overwhelming. I'll acknowledge that as these titles, as these headlines flash in. And this is simply a sample of some of the articles, some of the major groundbreaking work that's happening at UWM, the types of things that have individual impact, the types of things that are broad, national, and international in scope. And some of these stories have picked up so much media attention. They've really put UWM on a grand stage. And just a few of them that I'll mention. The first one describes some of the work that we're doing in the types of work on 280,000-year forests in the South Pole. Who'd have thought, right? Our executive MBA students who are doing work with the city on grading restaurants according to the sanitation reports and developing quick ways to get the word out. A third example is the app brewery work, where students at UWM are working with folks at the medical college in the neurology and neurosciences to develop an app that is being used today in surgical centers and medical schools in 30 different locations around the country. Great national media coverage on this and wonderful exposure and experience for our students. So this is something that I'll talk a little bit more about later, but I want to just show you quickly some of the aspects that are reinforced by these stories. So I'm not going to go through all of the guiding values, but I want to talk about how every one of those examples that I just shared really is something that has one or more of these guiding values at the heart of it. And some of the words just in the quick scan of this, you see the innovation, and I think you can appreciate where that's occurring, the types of openness to inquiry, diversity, ethical behavior, and a number of other aspects. So more on that toward the end of this. I'd like to use that really closer to the summary in more depth. What I do want to spend more time on is the update since the last time I've spoken with you in the context of our strategic framework. That is focusing primarily on the outstanding learning environment, our research excellence, and ultimately our community engagement in building the talent pipeline. So I'll address each one of those at a time and relate them to the big projects that we have underway, as well as some of the outcomes that are important. Outstanding learning environment. Well, when I ask a simple question like, what's involved, I think you'd say, well, we're all involved in pretty much everything we do around learning environment. So if I can get a little more specific, we've been developing even more effective bridge programs, as just one example. I'm going to talk shortly about the M-cubed work, where we're talking about bridges across MPS, MATC, and UW-Milwaukee. But this summer alone, we had a 25% increase in students participating in our bridge programs. That's something underscores the talent pipeline. We've developed a more sophisticated and a more engaged student success network that encompasses more activity across schools and colleges, as well as in centralized areas involving development as well. On the career planning side, one of the important outcomes, and I'm going to hit this theme a number of times today, one of the important outcomes that we will increasingly be evaluated on and supported through is how we do on a number of outcomes. And one of them is going to be around career planning, placement activities. And what we know from our most recent survey is that nearly 60% of the graduates over fiscal 17 who responded to the surveys have had an internship, clinical, or field work experience. So elevating that is critically important for our campus. Why it matters, I think you can appreciate that these all contribute to retention and graduation rates. Our English and math reform results have been stellar. The types of things that we're doing, I won't go through all the details, but it's a great story with respect to what we're doing and how that's making a difference. And the impact on the achievement gap. Now, it's not all positive. We're not a perfect organization. I don't know many that are. But I will tell you that this achievement gap is something that is very important to me and I think to all of us on campus. And I'd like to talk a little bit about this. Wisconsin has a #1 spot, and it's not a good one. It's #1 for being the worst in achievement with high school graduation. Of all states in the country, we're the #1 position for having the greatest gap between black and white achievement. That's the audience with whom we deal, and that's something that has been decades in the making, and there's no simple answer to this. In that context, there was an article that you might have seen not too long ago, where we have one of the worst black and white achievement gaps in the country. This isn't news for those of us who've been working on that. In fact, when I became chancellor in 2014, I talked a lot about student success, and I asked groups to work on this, and I'd like to tell you what we've been doing. I put a report earlier last year on my website. It's under the student success section, and it outlines an action plan that has 7 key components. I'm really proud of the progress that we've made, and I think if you read that article that Karen Herzog wrote that came out in the newspaper, despite the headline, the content of the article shows exactly what we're doing and the progress that we're making. And I'm very happy about that, but we have much, much more to do. I want you to know my stance, so I pulled that out of the article, and this is important for, I think, everybody to appreciate what I expect and where I stand on this. And my stance is, as it says here, if we can't improve retention and graduation rates, I'm the wrong person for the job. And I, of course, put that in a 3 to 5 year period because while we can measure 1st to 2nd year retention next year, you can't really measure 4 and 6 year graduation rates immediately. We need leadership on the campus to help close that gap, and we need to go on the offense. It's the right thing to do ethically and morally for our students, and I mean that. And so I'm happy to report that this last fall, for the first time, we had a significant delta. We went up 6 percentage points in the black male 1st to 2nd year retention. That's foundational. If we can't do that, if we don't do that, we're not going to get to improvements in the 4 and 6 year graduation rate. So this is the kind of progress, but it came through a number of items. So I talked earlier about the bridge program. That's one of them, and the increased number of students that are participating. We can talk about invasive or more gently, let's call it proactive advising. But we have to be invasive with respect to advising. There's no other way around that. We have early warning systems that have been employed, and we're using technology in a great way for that. There's a number of other activities that include peer mentoring, more tutoring, changes in the English and math courses, many other types of activities that are involved. So again, I encourage you to take a look at that. So I don't mean to spend a lot of time on it, but it is important. It's a challenge, and decades in the making, and we're going to turn this around much more quickly than the decades it took to get there. Another piece of that is, if we are like 41 other academic institutions in the country, urban serving, campuses that seek to have an access and research mission, we accept roughly 90% of the applicants. In that population, you can work just on that receiving end, students who apply, or you can do something more proactive. When I was first named interim chancellor in 2014, Vicki Martin of MATC, herself a Panther, and Darian Driver of MPS, we took a blood oath, and we joke and we laugh about it, but we actually made a strong commitment to each other to strengthen the pipeline across not a few thousand, not a few schools, but across every school in MPS, all of MATC, and all of UWM. That's 143,000 students. The future of this region depends very much on us working together, and that's what M cubed is about. It's the exponential power of us working together. It's not just lip service, it's not just goals and action plans, it's the implementation. The types of things that we've been doing today include the implementation of career cruising across all of our areas, so people put together academic and career plans, and then they're held to that, and they have advice and guidance, and their teachers and advisors are very much more involved with that. We have dual enrollment courses today that start in high school, so students can get AP, they can get advanced placement credit at a much greater rate than they've had before. We're doing joint faculty and professional development, where we have where we have faculty that work and do collaborative workshops across the institutions. MPS today faces a significant challenge with respect to math and science teachers. They can put the best curriculum together in the world, but if they don't have the teachers, and so they're having to work on a lot of the development of those areas, and we're helping with that. So there's many other areas that are there. Also in the context of the student outstanding learning environment, I want to share with you a new development that you might not have heard a lot about. And this deals with what is our Connected Systems Institute. And let me back up a little bit and talk about what's going on and what I mean by that. You've perhaps heard about Industry 4.0, or what's commonly referred to as the next industrial revolution. And you can go back in time and talk about in the 1800s and the evolution of things in the steam engine days and how that changed things. And then you can go into electrification. And then you can go into the application of technology for the previous revolutions. But today, increasingly, our employers that we work with are saying connected systems are where it's at. And what I mean by that is, think about smartphones, basic. Think about smart cars, smart factories, smart homes, and then go beyond that and talk about how do products, services get evaluated, measured, used. So what that means is that I go to a CEO of Rockwell Automation and he says, Mark, we hire more students from UWM than any other campus in the world. And he shows me, and other people at Rockwell show me, 14 universities that they hire at, and we're number one. He says the best thing across all the different initiatives we're working on is if you could pull a lot of these things together, and I hire students out of Department X, Y, and Z, but it takes them a year or 2 or 3 to really be able to figure out how we're all connected and how the different parts of the organization work in a systems type of approach. So I had that conversation with him at about the same time in 2014. I discussed with Satya Nadella what he sees on the horizon. He's the CEO of Microsoft, an alumnus of our computer science program. And he was saying the same thing, and he said, with your industrial manufacturing base in Wisconsin, that's really an opportunity for us to work on together. So they have provided support, Rockwell has provided support, and Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation has weighed in on this. They've given support, almost $1 million, and we launched officially at the time we had our public campaign launch. Having raised the initial funding for this, we're pursuing, in fact today in Michigan, Some of our representatives, some of our folks are visiting FANUC, which is a major automation company, and they'll be part of this, and we've got a lot of other organizations that will be part of this, but the focus is on providing not only students with additional tools and understanding that can participate, but helping solve industry problems, really working on, as we put this together, an opportunity to build on this partnership to kickstart this next industrial revolution in Wisconsin, to have something that builds on, and frankly is a national center of excellence to look at how we use technology drawing from a lot of different areas on campus through collaboration of researchers, solving problems, and advancing the understanding of what often you might have heard of as the Internet of Things. It's more than just a phrase, it's meaningless, it's really something that has a lot of potential. The second major area is in terms of our exceptional research university. Building on this strategically, there's a number of activities across the top in terms of what's involved. I kind of think about this phrase, living the plan. And what I mean by that is that no area of all our strategic directions is probably more advanced and has been more effective at us having a plan that goes back to when many of us were involved in the strategic planning of this campus from 2010, 11, and 12, where we had a research excellence team that was led by Mark Harris and has had many of you involved. And that has continued to be implemented and has enabled us to contribute to the Research One standing that we have today, building on the decades of great work that have occurred. But the things that are involved today, and I give credit to both Mark and more recently Dean Maria Gajorjiska-Josephaska with respect to developing a plan for how we got the R1, what are the critical dimensions, and what will it take to keep us there. And so really following through with that, we're looking at the growth in interdisciplinary problem-based research teams with workshops, multiple workshops that we've had, and allocating some funding for that. Implementing tactics to attract and retain excellent grad students. Let's dive into this for a moment. This year, we said we're going to allocate $375,000 more to graduate student stipends. That's on top of two previous exercises that have totaled $1 million. So we're at almost $1.4 million in additional research funding. And that's base budget for attracting stronger graduate students. Department chairs are reporting that we have higher quality students that are being attracted, and this is a really important part. And I think on the research side, you'd say that has been a top priority. So we're delivering on that. And then, because of the collaborative work that's done and the funding possibilities from federal sources in terms of grants and Research One standing, strengthening health, STEM, and entrepreneurial fields across the campus. This matters, of course, because of the R1 status, but it's also the impact and what UWM's mission is all about. Whether we have R1 status or not, we have been a strong and prominent research university for many, many decades. We're also driving impact around our research in another way. And so I want to share with you an update on something that you might not have heard about. I don't know if I've talked in much detail about this in my past plenaries, but it's something that is critically important to us all, and we have a unique opportunity. In fact, I think of in Wisconsin, how water is an opportunity, but fresh water in many parts of the world, it's a threat, it's a scarcity, it's a concern. So we're going to exploit that opportunity, take advantage of that by collaborating in an unprecedented manner across the UW system, with UWM leading the way, to what we're calling Freshwater University. This will build on a lot of areas at UWM, as well as the water research and the water curricula at a lot of different campuses in the UW system. Programs that would be involved here and are being involved is areas in the natural sciences, resource management, agriculture, engineering, technology, economics, and policy. This is in the planning stages. Faculty and provosts have been getting together fairly often to discuss this, and I'll be briefing the chancellors at the next chancellor's call in terms of the ambitious undertaking that this is. I just had a conversation earlier today with Ray Cross about this, and we'll be talking with our system vice president, who helped us kick off Navigating the Future of Water Freshwater Summit recently. The partnerships and the impact, of course, I think are huge with respect to what we can do here. It's a statewide partnership with an awful lot of advantages if we can do this well. One of the key advantages, not just because of the research collaboration that we can do, but also if we can attract and retain Wisconsin students, but especially those from outside of Wisconsin, because we're one of the few places in the world you can come and study fresh water. On the last area, in terms of our strategic goal areas, community engagement and the talent pipeline, just a few fairly high-level areas in terms of the summary and the impact that we have here. One thing that we're doing that some of you have heard me talk about before is SAJAC. SAJAC stands for Social Entrepreneurship, Justice, and Equity Compact. This program has been known for distributing many grants and providing support for existing initiatives where we have partnerships with our faculty, staff, and existing community initiatives. And we're today focusing on SAJAC explorers, people who are from disadvantaged backgrounds that helps them get more involved in academic activities. We are planning, and we don't have it confirmed yet, but we're planning on not only having the $300,000 over the last two biennial budgets, $300,000 in each of those, building on that, but putting forward an even larger ask to have a more focused, specific, large project there. In terms of student work experiences and community engagement, I think it's powerful what we're doing with CLIP, which is the Community Leader Internship Program, Panther Foundations for Success, both of which engage corporate partners and strengthen the diversity of our regional talent pool. On the alumni programming front, we have today almost 1,000 Panthers at work involved in different corporate alumni programs. We have, in terms of the talent pipeline, a couple of remarkable updates. Our College of Engineering and Applied Science was able to report that in the last year, their students have either participated in co-ops, internships, or undergraduate research at the level of 96%, which is matched by the 96% placement rate that they had immediately upon graduation in terms of full-time employment. Similarly, the Lubar School of Business reports that 80% of their students were placed within 2 months of graduation, which is up 10%. So these are just some of the examples that underscores how important UWM is in the talent challenge arena that we're in, which is one of my next topics. As we think about this, it continues to show that education opens the doors, it provides the opportunities, and not only for quality of life, but has that larger economic impact on them, their families, and of course the state. When I think about the talent partnership, and I think about issues and activities going on right now, one of the pieces of data that I've shared a couple of times in different settings deals with the big picture of talent shortages. And I have to stand aside from this for a moment and tell you, this is a talent-rich area. We would often describe it as talent-rich. And what I mean by that is that we're one of the roughly sixth largest concentrations of college students in the country. In southeastern Wisconsin, across the 23 2- and 4-year academic institutions, there's about 188,000 students. But if you talk to employers, they frequently will say, in fact, Tim Sheehy, the head of the Milwaukee Metro Association of Commerce, has testified not only in front of the Joint Finance Committee of the legislature, but he's told our regents multiple times that this is the #1 talent issue facing southeastern Wisconsin. These numbers only begin to show the starting point, and the numbers which you've read by now. If you put a look at the individuals who are retiring and the individuals who are entering the workforce, and then if you project out even further, it's actually quite grim. Then if you add Foxconn, their suppliers, and the expected growth in this region, the numbers well exceed 100,000. So the key issue, and where funding will increasingly go, is around how we align ourselves to meet those demands. And we're in a good shape, a good position to be able to do that. Specifically, the types of things that we've been working on and UWM has been leading is work to address the types of headlines that you see here today, and more specifically, having partnerships that build on the types of things that we've been doing already fairly quietly, but being much more visible about those. So specifically, working with M7 and the higher ed institutions, 23 of them, and I've helped form a steering committee that I sent the email out yesterday to bring everybody together in the next few weeks to put some actual structure together around a lot of the work that we've been meeting on since last October. And this includes both public and private, as well as 2- and 4-year and really having great geographic representation throughout the region. So we really want to increase the number of the skilled professionals who are ready for the jobs of today and tomorrow. This sets the stage for me to talk not only about talent pipeline issues and the importance of our upcoming joining with UW-Waukesha and UW-Washington County, but how this is so important to us in terms of our overall mission. And let me point out that we've got a new web page, and I encourage you to take a look at this and some of the updates that we'll be putting here from time to time. But it's really 3 campuses and 1 mission is the tagline, and I think it's very important. There's a critical access role that is played at our 2-year college campuses, and there's also contributions to research that can be done in a lot of different ways in terms of both the faculty collaboration, the research strengths that are there, as well as the opportunities in their communities, with organizations and society. As you know, the keys, I often say, the keys are supposed to be handed over July 1st, the ownership keys. In fact, some of the things will be in place by July 1st, but full ownership, full assimilation really is going to take longer than that. July 1st is a pretty ambitious deadline, and we're focusing today on the HLC accreditation as well as enrollment issues. But that's something that we're working on very, very closely. Ron Perez leads the restructuring team. There's a number of individuals involved across the 7 functional teams that were launched early in January, and we've been putting a lot of activities together for that. I think the success of this is critically important to this region. I think it's important for us, and I view this as a very positive development for access, continued access, to continue the price point for the 2-year campuses, but to continue the ease for them to transfer across the UW systems, and preferably to UWM, as I've said in my visits to those campuses. So, as we look ahead, I want to talk first about the change in context as we start to look ahead. There's a number of different things that I'll talk about, and then we'll really jump into some of the looking forward. Not a day goes by where we don't see more about sexual harassment, sexual discrimination, misconduct in the news. And we put a couple of tags up there for CNN, New York Times, but in fact, it's virtually every media outlet. There's daily updates. Even about UWM, there have been stories. So I want to share with you a couple of comments. First, we and I take sexual harassment and misconduct seriously. When we're aware of it, I take it very seriously, and I have no tolerance for this. We have strong, well-developed policies and procedures that are in place. More than 90% of our employees have gone through the training in the last 6 months, and we're committed to maintaining a safe and supportive environment. I want to reinforce this message today and in other settings. I want everyone to be sensitive to our words, to our behaviors, and know that Equity and Diversity Services is an important conduit, an important place for you to go if you have concerns or instances of harassment or misconduct. On the second front, there's a number of things that I've alluded to along the way in my talk today about metrics and performance-based funding. This is a continuation of this trend that we have been seeing across different states. In fact, our Wisconsin Technical College system has had in place performance-based funding, I believe, for about a decade, but they're veterans of this. We've been seeing through the legislature in the last biennial budget requirements put in place. It's important that we understand what the expectations are, and that future funding, while it's $26.25 million in operating funds that will be distributed in the next budget, we can anticipate that any increases in funding to the UW system will be very much based on the 16-point weighting scale that will go in front of the legislature very soon. This is something that the UW system has developed in conjunction with campuses, and ultimately the regents approved this at the last meeting. The nice thing about this approach is that it does give us flexibility for campuses to have their unique missions given their different geographies and student populations. Some of the things that are important that are going to be expected to be in that would be the graduation and retention rates, the number of high school students from Wisconsin who are enrolled, the number of degrees that are in health-related and STEM fields, decreasing average student loan debt. So those are some of the things that we can expect more of in the future. The final area is around federal legislation. The good news is that since the last time I've given updates, we have had some positive passage, given some of the, I remember when I shared my plenary in the fall, we had not heard about some of the NSF, NIH, and other federal funding sources and what was at stake, and those have come through much better than we had anticipated or feared. But still, there remain some concerns. On the federal legislation front, the Perkins Loan Program stopped in September. 17,500 students have participated for the last several years across the state. Over 2,000 students at UWM alone have had Perkins loans. Those programs are no longer in place. And so I had the opportunity, as this picture shows, to host Speaker Paul Ryan, and I invited President Ray Cross and one of our regents, Mike Grebe, to join me in this meeting. The number one point that we hit was around Perkins loans and the rest of the resumption of that program. I don't think we'll get immediate as in February or March, but I think things look reasonably promising for that. We also talked about another matter, which is the Higher Education Act, reauthorization of that, to continue that, because there's a lot of things that can enable our students to be more successful. There's also some concerns or threats if it does go some of the ways that it's been proposed. So we talked about a number of those things, and the speaker was very supportive of a lot of the things that we're doing. He knows the unique role that UW-Milwaukee plays, and we have not missed an opportunity to visit with him whenever possible and reinforce importance. Looking ahead, more specifically, let me first talk a little bit about enrollments. Those are some things that while there are some future aspects of enrollment that I want to mention, those are up here. I want to tell you that even this year, while our freshman enrollment increased, our transfers are doing okay. But the out-of-state from Illinois are doing really well. That doesn't mitigate some of the larger ongoing declines that we've had since 2010. So the point being is that you can have growth in enrollment as we look toward the future for a lot of these dimensions that I'm going to talk about. But this year, enrollment declined 2.4%, and while that's less than what we expected, significantly less than what we expected, it still represents about a $4 million base budget decline. Next year, overall, we are expecting somewhere between a 1% and 2% decline. So that's much better than what we had this year, and it's much better than what we had predicted for last year. And it's based in part on the numbers that we're seeing right now. And let me just quickly, you've probably read this by now, but what you see there is a trend. Freshman applications up almost 5%, admits up 3.6%, new freshman applications up, so forth, or new transfers. The one thing that might be a question for you as you look at this is, why are the transfer admits, both categories of transfer admits, down? That's because that process, while people have applied and we have elevated applications, a lot of the packages are incomplete. In other words, it happens on a later cycle, as you can appreciate, with people being early in their semester right now. So a lot of the transfer stuff happens in the summer, so it's more squishy than what we'd like it to be. Freedom of Expression series, some great things, with Clarence Page kicking off with a number of faculty and student panelists, our Freedom of Expression series. Vice Chancellor Joan Prince has been leading that. She's working on a number of not only mini grants and other activities happening in some classrooms, but she's partnering with the Center for 21st Century Studies. And so Richard Grusin and Joan have been collaborating on a series of activities that will occur this spring, including the next one, which is March 7th. Dr. Jeffrey Stone, who is a noted First Amendment scholar, he'll speak on protest and protected speech. And these are important, not just for the campus community, but really for our larger community that has really positively, very well received these. So that's a quick update on that. Other activities. I want to come back to these guiding values as I begin the wrap up here. Today, we're embarking on something that I'd like to spotlight and recognize and frankly reinforce our guiding values. This speaks to what I consider to be the heart. This speaks to our culture. This speaks to who and what we are and how we do it. And I think throughout today, you've heard examples of each one of these. And let me just highlight a few things. Innovation, leadership, and collaboration. We truly are taking a leadership role in a lot of the activities, the big projects, the things that will make a bigger difference, rooted in doing things differently around innovation and especially collaboration. Opportunities for open inquiry. If we can't do that here, At the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, where will it be done? We need to fiercely protect and fight for that. A caring, compassionate, and collegial community is expressed to me daily as I work with individuals and see the types of care and concern that we have for each other. Diversity in all of its definitions. I want to elaborate on this for just a moment. Diversity is not just race, religion, sexual orientation, gender differences, LGBTQ, veteran status. It's a lot of additional things. It's our backgrounds, it's the way we think about things, it's perspectives. I want to also stress disabled and specially abled individuals. The way that we care and the way that we take care of, those are all important. But beyond that, I've challenged my leadership team. In the first cabinet meeting of 2018, I laid out some leadership themes. I'm not going to go through all of them. They have been shared, and they have been shared with deans, and they've been shared with other division heads. And I want you to know I talked specifically about diversity in much detail, and I expect us to have, in terms of hiring, in terms of development, in terms of really how we take care of each other, this is an important quality that we look at much more carefully and much more accountably and much more in a measured way. Ethical behavior, it sounds nice, but I want to say these are guiding values that I want to stress is not just a nice thing to do, it's an expectation. When we talk about misconduct, when we talk about making decisions in ethical ways, there's some important expectations about that, and those are spelled out pretty well, I think, in our behavioral expectations and code of conduct. Transparent and inclusive decision-making, I hope that you see me as always trying to model that. If you talk with my direct reports and certainly those who work with me on any initiatives, I very much try to do this. I can tell you participation takes longer, but it's a better way to make decisions. It's a better way for us to operate, and I hope you model that. I also want to stress something that my friend and our University Staff Committee Chair, Stan Yasitis, talks to me about a lot, and I want to reinforce this point. He said, you know, at the university staff level, we can be the last ones to hear something. And it's really hard to operate in that environment when everybody else has information that you know about. I hear that at a lot of different levels in a lot of different places. And I think it's the least that we can do is to inform individuals of what's going on, give updates, and provide that kind of background. And it doesn't just have to be one way like this, for which I apologize. Stewardship of resources. Wow. Are we the exemplar of that? I don't know if we could have a much better steward of resources. To have achieved so much with so little, I do not know of another campus who has done so much, and that's a credit to you. I could give you some specific examples of remarkable things that our procurement staff have achieved, the savings of hundreds of thousands of dollars for just different specific examples that have made a bigger difference for us to have more resources for the things that really truly matter. And then pride in our institution. I want to give a quick example. We had candidates recently for the CEO or Chief Enrollment Officer position. And the first candidate told me how impressed she was when somebody who's been on our janitorial staff for 32 years, Mike Moss, came in and she asked him about what he thought of the place. And he just went off on what he's been able to do. He's kind of a floater. So I saw him today, in fact, in the Klatsche Center. But he sometimes works in Chapman Hall, sometimes he'll work over in Bolton, or he'll work in different buildings. And so he really gets around. And I could give you a lot of examples of our wonderful staff in different roles like that, in the interactions that I have. But he told her how this environment was and supportive and how proud he was. And you know what mattered is that she came and she said, that really matters to me and it makes me want to come here. When you have custodial staff that have that sense of pride, it really opens the door. It was powerful, and I see that and hear that all the time. So today, we're going to highlight, and every month I'd like to highlight one of our values with a film, with a story, and you'll hear more about this. But today it's about diversity, so I'd like to share with you a video that exemplifies this, and this is from our graduation videos that we showed at graduation.
First started at UW-Waukesha. After I transferred to Milwaukee, I got accepted in an astroparticle physics research opportunity. Actually got to travel down to Antarctica and go put my software on the neutron monitors that they had down there. So UWM's Industry Expo got me talking to Magnatech, where eventually I was offered a position with them as an intern. After that year, I got actually offered a position both at NASA and the Department of Defense. Ultimately, I chose the Department of Defense because I'd be able to make it more than just an internship. And I actually got offered a position at the end of last summer to work as a signal analyst in Colorado upon graduation. It's just still mind-blowing to me, the opportunities that I've had. Crazy to think that I've gotten this far, and UWM has definitely helped me get where I am today.
I give all I have for you. I said I would be the one to take away your pain.
I moved to Nigeria at the age of 3. We went there kind of to learn about my father's culture and learn the language. We moved back here 13 years later for education and also to get to know my mom's family. My dad had cancer while I was just figuring out my major. Professors are actually very understanding, you know, and UWM as a whole, people are very understanding. I come to like the Black Cultural Center and I'll have a friend that's like, Amina, are you okay? I would tell them about, you know, how I was feeling because my dad had just passed away. I've like kind of built a family here in the Black Cultural Center. I was a part of African Student Association, Black Student Union, Muslim Student Association, and the Senate. It almost feels like you're really in like Congress, like the United States Senate, because you're talking about, you know, students' lives, and I felt like my voice mattered. I really want to be a part of the United Nations because it's a beautiful unity of, you know, all countries in the world talking about issues, and it's like for peace. I did an internship in Nigeria. Northern girls were being kidnapped, and it was just so close to my heart. I wanted to go there and help out. 2 of my aunts from Nigeria are coming to graduation, and I'm super excited. Them being there is almost like having my dad there. A lot of the things that he taught me is why I am the way that I am today. I found my voice here in college at UW-Milwaukee.
Didn't I say I would be the one to make you feel this way?
My first semester was really hard. Being very depressed and having a hospitalization, I had a medical withdrawal. I ended up joining the Army National Guard. I found it very rewarding to be part of this process. Eventually, I had to come out as queer, as trans, and in doing so, I knew I was going to be discharged under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It was a life or death decision for me. After I was discharged from the military, things got really hard. It was a very solitary, lonely existence, and I did feel alone. Having support of the LGBT Resource Center on campus was very helpful. While I was in that depression, I decided to go out to the Urban Ecology Center and start participating in a Thursday morning birding group. Getting connected with nature gave me a sense of purpose again. These birds, I thought, really kind of saved my life by keeping me tethered to a sense of survival. But I need to also call on my own strength and see that I saved myself too. I've had haters who say, yeah, but you can never finish anything. Coming back to school is my chance to finish something. I'm gonna graduate with a major and 2 minors. Even though I felt lost sometimes, I was always able to find my way to a path that made a lot of sense in that moment.
How about that? Those are just 3 of the over 5,200 stories that happened in 2017. We've put more than almost 30,000 students out of UWM graduating in the last 5 years. It's just remarkable, the scale and the quality. Sam, Amina, and Britton, they really do embody that guiding value of diversity. There's so much that epitomizes us, and their successes are really a reflection of you and what you do to enable their impact and empower them in their lives. So we've come together at UWM over the past few years, and we faced acute, major challenges. Some of the largest budget cuts we've ever faced, and today we're turning a corner. We're not out of the woods yet, as I've shared with respect to enrollment and revenue situation. It is something, though, that UWM has even more strength about today, I believe, is our mission centricity, how we know what's important and we know what matters, how we make a difference in the lives of so many individuals, countless people every day. I think the potent construct that underlies the education that we provide, one that's rooted in critical thinking, communication, different types of skills that are embodied in humanities, social sciences, liberal arts, is that it just keeps on giving and giving. It just increases valuably over time. So it's my pleasure to work with you, and it's also an honor to serve you, this institution, in our communities. And if I have a regret today, it's that I can't provide more resources, that I can't raise more funds, and I consider myself the chief fundraiser, and that means both in terms of state budget, that means in terms of all our fundraising and all the other activities. It's about increasing the resource base, and I can't do enough. That's my biggest challenge, to really enable and increase and elevate our impact. I guess a way to say it is to unleash even more of the incredible things that you enable. So in closing, thank you for everything that you do for our students and our community and everybody. And thank you also for letting me share this overly long plenary with you yet today. Thanks. Thank you. I'm happy to take, summary slide, sorry. So I'm happy to take any questions that you have. Yes, sir.
That's how my day is going. So, thank you. So I haven't checked out your 7 points on improving black graduation rate at UWM. I was curious how much of an effort or how much of a portion is based on like the community that they come from, and like what impact can we have off campus that would improve their graduation rate? Or do you even believe that would be an aspect of that?
That's an important question, and it kind of shows there's a lot of things that we can do once students are here, and there's things that we do that bridge out. Our TRIO and pre-college program are examples of that, types of things that we do starting with students that are in high school and sometimes even middle school types of approaches that do have that outreach. And so the kind of work led by April Holland in TRIO and pre-college and some of the other activities, they start before, and M-Cubed also focuses tremendously on what we do with students and for students before they come to UWM. Most of those programs that are talked about in the document that you've referred to are things that we do once they're in campus. I think it clearly is both, though. And I think most of you would agree that, what can we control? There's certain amounts of it, but the challenge, again, is one of resources for us to allocate that. One of the important things to recognize is when we look at issues of remediation, for example, and this is true not just for students of color, but all students. If you look at Wisconsin's high school math scores across the state, and you'd be amazed if you saw the data. It's not unique to southeastern Wisconsin. There are challenges across this state with respect to math and English remediation. And yet what we've done to modify a lot of our work, but that doesn't happen alone here. We work a lot with high schools to help change how they're teaching math and how they're because it is all connected. And if we don't look outside of UWM, we're going to increasingly be isolated. So I think your question is a really important one. Hope that helps. Other questions? Okay, thank you. Okay.